Hi, my name is Aliyah Lett, and this is part 2 of my Research Methods 312 paper presentation. And in this section, we're going to focus mainly on the methods that were conducted in regards to that of the experiment. Again, this study aimed to find if there was a correlation between social media usage and the effects of young girls' self-esteem. The experiment utilizes 24 participants, 13 who were male and 11 who were aged 22 to 54. The two variables included in these findings were age and survey responses. To collect additional data in this experiment, a collective self-esteem scale by Lutheran and Crocker, and a Heisenberg self-esteem scale, and a set by Rosenberg set 1965, and also the Lutheran and Crocker was 1992, and a 7-point Likert scale survey conducted by Lett, does social media usage affect teenage girls' self-esteem, was utilized. Each self-esteem scale measures each participant's self-esteem without outside factors. Once the two scales were complete, Lett wanted to know how people would respond to the statement, social media usage negatively impacts teenage girls' self-esteem. And that's when that 7-point Likert scale came in. So for the first study that was conducted, a Lutheran and Crocker 1992 collective self-esteem sample was conducted. There were a broad range of ages, which benefit sample size diversity. People were in their early 20s who recall being teenagers, while the middle-aged individual participants that were selected typically have teenage daughters or have teenage daughters who currently use social media. So it only made sense to use these level of participants in the first collection self-esteem survey by Lutheran and Crocker of 1992. It was a sample of 100 participants, and it was collected from Cleveland State University on a campus on a busy weekday. The participants ranged from 18 to 45 years of age. In the Rosenberg self-esteem scale by the Rosenberg M, 80 participants were collected from the Cleveland University College campus on a mildly busy weekday. The participants range from 22 years old to 55 years of age. A 7-point Likert scale survey, does social media affect teenage self-esteem, was then conducted by myself, Aliyah Lett. The participants in the study were regular people whose ages were from 24 to 54. 11 of the participants were female and 13 of the participants were male. And then I just go into detail about the different demographics that was in the survey. The individuals in my survey were that selected from a large grocery store in Cleveland, Ohio. Each volunteer was asked if they consented to being part of the survey, and I received written consent from each participant to collect information in the research. So the different instruments that were utilized in the collection, again, was the scale, the collective self-esteem scale by Lutheran R, K, and Crocker J, 1992. It was designed to evaluate each participant's personal identity in relation to self-esteem, socially and privately. And the other tool that was used was the Rosenberg self-esteem scale, 1965, was conducted to expand further on these findings. This one used a 10 statement on a 4-point Likert scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Unlike the Lutheran scale, it focused more on the participants' internal feeling of self, so personal feeling of self, such as increased self-focus, which will also highlight the importance of someone's self-esteem. Furthermore, Lett myself utilized SurveyMonkey and created a 7-point Likert scale ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree to the statement that I mentioned earlier on in the presentation. Excel was utilized to document the findings, and it was interpreted in one sample to use test. The survey aimed to measure the participants' agreements with the above mentioned statement, so the previous mentioned statement, and the survey would be collected from each participant after they give consent. The survey statement will be on a clipboard, so they can either write it out, or they could have utilized a QR code by scanning the code and taking the survey online. The data was then used in Excel to compile the data and conduct the one sample t-test and create tables, line graphs, histograms, and the scatter plots of the findings. The data collected in the Excel sheet was calculated using a one sample t-test. The statistical hypothesis aims to estimate the population's feelings using the population sample. So instead of using the full population of everybody in Cleveland, Ohio, I instead localized it and collected the data from that of a local grocery store to get an idea of what the large consensus is of the larger population. The p-value in the statistics aim to find if there's a strong enough correlation between our hypothesis and the accurate findings presented in the data. The histogram in the use of this study shows how frequently each participant selected their agreeableness on the 7-point Likert scale. Instead of using different statements on the x-axis like disagree, these statements were replaced with their numerical equivalent, such as 2. However, the lower and upper bounds, 1 and 7, included the statements used in the Survey Monkey questionnaire, so that of strongly disagree or agree. The scatter plot that was designed shows the age of demographic of the study participant. It uses all numbers ranging from 0 to 7 to describe the 7-point Likert scale used throughout the data collection. Furthermore, the line plot depicts male and female participants and the level everyone selected on the Likert scale. After completing the 7-point Likert scale in SurveyMonkey and collecting all the necessary data and inputting it in Excel, the first column had the names of all of our participants, the second column had their ages, and the third column had their genders. In the fourth and fifth columns, a formula was used to find the exact number of female and male participants in this study. The data from the participants was collected from the 7-point Likert scale and placed in the sixth column. With the Excel add-ons, 2 tables, one for age and another for survey, was created. Both tables included the mean, which is the average of the data, standard error, which indicates how much the sample mean can vary from the population mean, median, defined as the numerical value that is presented in the middle of the set of data, mode, which is measured from the value that appears most frequently in the data set, standard deviations, which describes the space between the data in comparison to that of the mean. Sample variance is the average squared of the deviation from the mean and the sample data. Kurtosis, this statistical measurement describes how pointed the distribution is concerning the data around the mean about the tails. Skewness measures the shape of the data, if it's skewed left or if it's skewed right. Range described as the difference between the upper and lower values presented in the data set, minimum being the smallest value, maximum being the most enormous value, and sum being the total of the values. And finally, count, the number of data points. In this case will be the sample size. And again, this data was then used to create the histogram, scatter plot, line graph, and describe each instrument method used. The results of the Collective Self-Esteem Scale by Lutheran and Crocker in 1992 found that most individuals agreed that they believe they are positive social group members, so they have high self-esteem levels in regards to themselves. The researchers were able to measure how participants evaluated their self-esteem. This is not only based on their personal attributes, but also the way they view themselves as being part of the group. This ideology is termed collective self-esteem. This data was collected using the multi-level Likert scale that was presented earlier. The results of the Rosenberg self-esteem scale showed results that 70% of the 80 participants in the study had a positive sense of self and a general feelings about themselves. And then that evidence shows that self-esteem is negative and linear concerning mental disorders and anxiety. That means that there is a negative correlation between that of self-esteem and mental disorders and anxiety. These findings and the questions presented provide excellent internal consistency, stability, and test-retest reliability.